starts when it starts. And it's over when it's over. How are you back here? Good to see you. Thanks for your work. I haven't had time to chat you up this week. I'm grateful for you. Oh, you're so kind, bless you. Well, you're so kind. Thank you so much. Tell your friends. Grateful, Elaine. Sitting here the whole time, huh? Yeah, make sure you get your seat. You sound good. Good morning. Hillary's doing the funeral. She actually, I'm hearing that it's just not quite the same.
Hi, Walt.
Hey, good to see you.
How are you, buddy?
Yeah, good to see you.
Hi, Nancy.
Oh, it must be wonderful. You still got this guy. I missed you last night. Thanks for that. Yep. One foot ahead of the other one. Good morning. My name's Walt. No, I. Oh, good. I'm part, but I was in the costume.
Everyone. Good to see y'all. I want to thank Ted Hartley for leading us by playing piano all week. Thank you, Ted. Rabbi Dan was here 20 minutes early. I was like, don't let us turn you into a Gentile, please. It's bad form. Yeah. My friends in the black church often talk about BPT, Black People Time. I think basically we Protestants, we WASPy people are the only ones who are big enough suckers to show up on time to stuff, right? So they say in the African American church is sort of like a party. It starts when it starts. It's over when it's over. For us, I got people who stand up, wheel out, and leave, like right at noon, right? I got to beat the Baptists. All right. The hymn is number 139. It's Praise to the Lord, the Almighty. Would you stand and sing number 139?
My
Amen. Please be seated. So this is our last day with Rabbi Dan Gordon, but not our last time with him. So at 3 o'clock today on the porch at Evelyn Hall, we'll have a kind of conversation. This morning's going to be more conversational in tone, too. Where are you, Dan? I don't see you right now. Ah, good, great. Somebody left some questions up here for you. So there'll be tea, there'll be coffee, there'll be Rabbi, there'll be us. And, these amazing wraparound porches that, make us famous, you can go, hang out there. So we'll do that. One common way to contrast Judaism and Christianity has been to say that Judaism is into practice. Christianity is into belief. Now, there's something to that. I got 1,000-page tomes on my shelf with titles like Creed or What Christians Believe. We've had tiny denominations come out of splitting from somebody else over this or that verse in Ephesians or whatever. But I still worry it's too easy. Jewish belief in the oneness of God is pretty essential. So you get stories of Jewish martyrs being executed by the Romans or the Nazis or whoever, and they're reciting the Shema, praying about the oneness of God. We Christians have practices, and we don't even notice them because they seem so normal to us. One of them is singing hymns. That's not something every religious community does. They'll sing, but not necessarily hymns. You see what I'm saying? But we feel like that's just a religious thing to do. No, Protestants invented that. Everybody else has copied it. You're welcome, world. So here's a story that helps me understand the blessed difference between us. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, again, he was the chief rabbi of Great Britain. Now, the chief rabbi of Great Britain sounds like it goes back 10 billion years, but actually Queen Victoria invented it. It's because there was an Archbishop of Canterbury. If a monarch wanted to talk to the whole church, she only had to have one meeting. And so she wanted one meeting with one Jewish leader, hence you have a chief rabbi of Great Britain. It goes back to the 1800s. So Sacks tells the story of his kids running up to him and all excited, and they say, "Dad, we have a famous ancestor." And Sacks thought, I thought having chief rabbi of Great Britain for a dad was cool enough, but whatever. Anyway, tell me who our famous ancestor is. If you go back far enough, we're descended from Abraham. And he said, "Yeah, that's what it means to be Jewish." Guess I didn't teach y'all all that well. In other words, to be Jewish means you're in Abraham and Sarah's family, either by descent or conversion. And it doesn't actually matter that much whether you believe the stuff. That really worries us Christians. Do you have the correct ideas in your head? That's not as big a worry. So I asked a rabbi friend once, a normal question for us Christians. I asked her, "Are your kids believers?" We Christians ask each other that. It's kind of a mark of whether you've parented well and how guilty you feel and that kind of thing, right? And she looked at me and she said, "We don't really talk that way." Now that's an interesting rebuke. She didn't say you're wrong. She said, "We don't talk that way." It's a different language, right? She said, "I don't actually know what they believe, but they get the peoplehood bit." You see the difference? They know who they belong to, what people they're a part of, and that was enough for her. Another example. A rabbi friend of mine is a 16th generation rabbi. 16. Goes all the way back to Lithuania in the 1400s. He can tell you all their names. And now his daughter is in rabbinical school. Cool thing. I get a little hazy on who my ancestors are going back beyond about my great-grandparents in every direction, right? But if you're a faith premised on going back to Abraham and Sarah, those lists matter, yeah? So suddenly you understand why the stuff that annoys us in the Bible, so-and-so begat so-and-so who begat so-and-so, and we just skip over it, that really matters if you're thinking Jewishly, right? Okay. So for us Christians, faith in Jesus Christ, baptism into his church, makes us part of this peoplehood. So Rabbi Dan, I can't wait to hear more about our shared family. Come and teach us.
Who here has been to all 5 programs? Wow, thank you so much. Who's been to 3 of the 5? 4 of the 5. All right, terrific. Who's here for the first time? All right, okay. There was a rabbi in Jerusalem who told me the story of a rabbi who had that one Sabbath he said, last year at this time, we read the same Torah portion, and I gave a very powerful sermon. Who remembers it? And nobody raised their hands. So the next week, they were more prepared for the question. He asked the same question. Everybody raised their hand. They all remembered it. He said, terrific. That's exactly the point I wanted you to know. He sat down and said, I don't have to do a sermon. I don't have to repeat myself. So the third week, they were waiting for it. He asked the same question. Half the people raised their hands and half the people didn't. And he said, this is what I've been waiting for. Those of you with your hands up, teach it to those of you with your hands up. So those of you who had your hands up saying, this is my first day here, talk to people throughout the week. Once again, it's been such a pleasure. Just the introductions from Jason. He's always picking something up, and he knows more about a lot of things than most people know about some things. It is a common perception, deed versus creed, because the belief, yes, is important, and Shema Yisrael is important. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is one. I had a family, I was a part-time rabbi in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and families that I didn't see very often, and there was someone coming up for bar mitzvah, and the father said, I'm really an atheist, but if this is what my wife and son want, I'll be supportive. He had before the bar mitzvah happened, he passed away. And in learning about him after his death, and I was just talking to Bob over here, who was a funeral director for 60-some years, about the power of meeting people posthumously. He had older children who were adults, and when they told me about their life, he said Shema with them every night. He prayed with them, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one, every night, though he called himself an atheist. And that's part of the power, because the way I think about it is that while I think of Christianity as being focused very much on faith, and Judaism being very focused on mitzvahs, actions, commandments, it doesn't mean that doing good deeds is absent from Christianity, or that faith is absent from Judaism. It's a focus on what we teach. And part of what we teach is that if you have a crisis of faith, if you are questioning, we are the people of questions. If you are questioning something, then don't stop doing the commandments. Maybe you'll get the faith back. But that the commandments are as important, if not more important, than the belief. So that's a little bit. In terms of time that Jason was referring to, there was a rabbi who was substituting a class, and he didn't know what the time parameters were, and he said, how long is this class supposed to be? And one of the students said, Rabbi, you talk as long as you want. We leave at 1 o'clock. So I may keep talking at 11 o'clock. The one other thing I'm going to say about time, besides everything has a season and there's a time for every experience under heaven, I was once at this was also in Jackson Hole. It was my first service there, and there were 5 people there at 6:30 at the time we started, and they had paid for my transportation, they had paid, and I was hoping to impress them to be able to come more often. And I said to the cantor, should we wait until more people come? And he said, I find that people who are late always seem very disappointed when they find out they haven't missed anything. So I appreciate your being here on time. I finally got from Central Time, and I've got a bunch of questions here, and I think I can handle all of them. Let's see. Sometimes it depends. Not always. If you think so. And I'll have to get back to you on that one. But seriously, folks. My educator friend. Yes, your name again?
Christine.
Christine, of course. Begins with Christ. And the knowledgeable person, she asks, does Midrash consider external issues, story of Abraham and Isaac, at first reading as a faithful test? On second thought, the society God was making a contrast with was one that had child sacrifice and cult prostitution. Therefore, God was pulling the chosen people out of that system. She answered her own question. But the important general point to that is that considering the timing of when things are happening, when I told the story about the kosher pot, I've also been watching my videos, and I realize the word comes up more often than it should. So I'm going to try and watch that. The story of the pot, whether it was kosher or not, and the different theories of that, the timing, that was during the time that Jesus was preaching something else. And so they wanted to make that contrast. And so also there is a section in the book of Numbers where the daughters of a man, I always mispronounce his name, Zelophehad, I think. Right, Jason nodded his head. Their father had died without any male heirs. The society's rule at the time was that if there are no male heirs, then the inheritance goes to the community. And the daughters pleaded with Moses and said, how are we going to live without that inheritance? And Moses pleaded to God, and God said, change the rule. Give the daughters their inheritance. And it was also kind of a contrast of being able to teach something different. The other thing that's very apparent in the Bible is that the eldest child has the rights of inheritance, and it's not the eldest child in most cases in the Bible. That Isaac wasn't the eldest. Jacob wasn't the eldest. It was by moments. Joseph was not the inheritor, but seemed to be the favorite. And so I think a lot of things in the Bible are about teaching us differently than we expect. The section right after the Ten Commandments in Exodus deals with how to treat your servants. And the word for servant, of course, is the same as the word for slave. And it doesn't say don't have slaves. That was the way of the time. But it says, if you have a slave for 7 years, you must set him free unless he doesn't want to go. In that case, you do a permanent binding, you put a earring or some kind of a physical sign that says he's with you. Now, why would a slave not want their freedom after 7 years? Maybe because they were treated well. And so that law is a way to go around how do you treat your slaves, because how do we learn? We learn from what we're taught. We learn from what we're seeing. And the Israelites had been slaves in the land of Egypt. They had been mistreated, and so they could easily learn that when they're in power to mistreat others. But the Torah teaches us, don't behave the way you've been treated. Treat people the way you would have wanted to be treated. When I was a camp director, there was a counselor who was I was told before I took the job the list of the counselors who were good and should be rehired, and the ones who should not be rehired. And of course, the first one on the list of those who should not be rehired was the first one who called for a job. And I was told that he had abusive punishments for the kids, that he would march them around the cabin at 2 o'clock in the morning. And he came in for an interview, and I said, I've been recommended not to rehire you. Any idea why? And he said, yeah, because he had had an exit interview and the previous director had told him. I said, so why? He said, I was too harsh with the kids. What did you do? He told me about the marching around the cabin. I said, Dave, where did you learn something like that? He said, when I was a kid and I was bad, my father would put a bar of soap in each of my hands and make me hold it there for a very long time, and it hurt. And I had to keep holding it for a very long time. I said, Dave, what did you learn from that? He said, I didn't learn nothing. And I said, what did your kids learn from marching around the cabin? He said, they didn't learn nothing either. Then he said, I only know what I've been taught. You teach me something different, I'll do it that way. And he was one of the best counselors I had. After death, you spoke of the tradition of a family staying at home for a week. Is there also a tradition of burial taking place within a certain time frame? If so, how do these two mesh? That we are supposed to bury within 24 to 48 hours. It has changed during times when those were times when people all lived in the same neighborhood. So now that people are traveling and they have to make schedules, they do sometimes postpone. So the Shiva starts right after the funeral. So if the funeral isn't for another week or 10 days, in which case we don't embalm, we put them under refrigeration, then the Shiva really starts after the funeral. But yeah, those two do mesh. Some people, this is someone asked me this question yesterday as well. Some people believe the God of Israel and the God of Islam are one and the same. I see some head shaking, my head nods. How can hallelujah to God, who loves the Jewish people, be the same as Allah Akbar to the God who wants to destroy the Jewish people? It's a hard question. The Muslims who I know would say that flying an airplane into a building with the intent of murder is not a Muslim act, and that the people who do it, claiming to be Muslim, are not Muslims. That is what religious Muslims have told me. Allah comes from the word El, which means God, and I don't expect 100% agreement with this, because I wouldn't get 100% agreement from all Muslims. But I do know peaceful Muslims. After October 7th in Houston, there was a group of 6 rabbis and 6 imams who got together for conversation. And at first it was about brotherhood and let's get to know each other. But then, as instructed by the facilitator of the group, he said, let's stop being polite. Let's say what's really up and how we're really feeling. And there was a man from Lebanon, a physician, and he recounted how his father had to walk from Israel to Lebanon because he had to leave his home in 1948. And one of the rabbis said, I get that. You want to know what my grandfather had to do in 1941? He didn't have to walk away from anything. He was yanked out of his home, put on a train, and sent to a concentration camp to starve. And so, pain is pain. injustice is injustice. And we got to understand that both of those folks were wronged. And one isn't more wrong than another. And it's very complicated and very confusing to remember things that were done to your ancestors that were wrong, and things that were done to someone else's ancestors that were also wrong. And that can bring about a mutual empathy. Not an easy question. Not a definitive answer. But those, in my opinion, monotheistic religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, who say there is one God, it's the same God. My opinion. Many do not believe the Exodus story is historically true. I would say is historically 100% accurate. Do you? Have you seen the photos in Google Earth, evidence of the Red Sea crossing, the split rock, the golden calf altar, and blacktop Mount Sinai in Arabia? No, I haven't seen the Google Earth version. Again, this is me, not everybody. I don't care. I don't care. Just because it might not have happened 100% the way it was written, doesn't mean there isn't something to learn from it. And so, when I read those passages, I say, what can I learn from this? When I read passages that are uncomfortable for me, I say, what can I learn from this? Did I say sometime this week, just because it may not have happened doesn't mean it didn't happen? It happened in one way or another, and there's something for us to learn from it. Often when I'm preaching, I'm careful to say, instead of saying, God said, we're taught that God said. I haven't done that all the time this week because I don't have the facts. I don't have the facts. I loved what Jason said earlier this week about judgmentalness and who's going to hell. It's not my call. That we have one judge, one God, one king, one arbiter, and that's the one who gets to make the call. Okay, I'm going to save some Messiah questions for the end. Why are there two distinct creation stories in the Bible? Genesis 1 through 2 verse 3 and Genesis 2, 4. And is the Bible, according to what I've checked into Lilith, was a medieval Jewish folklore story? Do you agree with this? I agree it's a medieval Jewish folklore story. I talked a little bit about Lilith before, that Lilith is not mentioned in the Bible and is a mythical creation. Why are there two stories? Some say there are two stories. Did I bring my Bible? No. Some say there are two stories. That's a hymnal. Some say there are two stories. Some say there are two stories because the first one is the cryptic one, and the second one is a more detailed elaboration. Some say they were written by different people. There's all different kinds of theories about it, but in the first one, it says, God said, let us create man in our image, male and female, he created them. Kind of implies two people. That's the hermaphrodite theory. And then later, Eve is created from a rib from Adam. So the answer to the question is, there's a lot of different possibilities with that. And it takes some careful study as to answer the question why. But it's a very, very valuable question. Messiah question 2. How did the world populate with just Adam and Eve? They were told, be fruitful and multiply. There were other children after Seth, for example, and Cain went off and knew his wife. Where did he get his wife? These are the mysterious questions that are excellent for Sunday school students and excellent for adults. And those are ones we don't have the answer to. There was some kind of a quiz mystery about a painting of Adam and Eve, and the question was, what is inaccurate in this painting? Because they had belly buttons. And Adam and Eve would not have had umbilical cords. So there's a lot of things that we either accept or don't accept, that Cain found a wife someplace and populated more people. The other question is, also, after the flood, there was just Noah and his family. Same kind of thing. Could be there's a lot of incest going on. Could be that, don't know. Don't know. I was reading the question wrong because I was thinking about another catastrophe of when Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed. And when Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed, Lot and his family left. Lot's wife, as you might remember, wasn't supposed to turn around and look. She did. She was turned into a pillar of salt. One of my storytelling colleagues twisted that. It's called a tikkun, a fixing. Fixed that into, instead of it being a punishment, that it was her tears when she saw that all her friends and neighbors had been destroyed. And she turned into a pillar of salt from her own tears. But here is Lot with his daughters who think there are no men left. And they want children. And the only man they know is their father. And this part is in the Torah. They got their father drunk and seduced him. We don't do that with the kids' Sunday school. But do you know what people are said are descended from that incestuous relationship?
Moabites.
Anyone know?
Moabites.
Who said that? Say it loud.
Moabites.
The Moabites. Absolutely. And who are the Moabites?
The Jordanians at the moment, if you want to look at
Okay.
it.
I don't know about at the
We don't
moment.
think about that.
But the Moabites, there was a famous Moabite. Ruth. Yes. Ruth was a Moabite. And Ruth was Naomi's daughter-in-law, who would not leave Naomi when they were both widowed, whose kindness helped her mother-in-law, because she said, wherever you go, I shall go. Your people shall be my people. Your God shall be my God. Where you live, I shall live. Where you die, I shall die. Naomi sends Ruth to Oded's farm to glean. Oded likes her, is kind to her, does not take advantage of her, marries her, and they begin begatting. And by the time they begat, I forget the exact term, but one of them was Jesse. And Jesse was the father of David. And the house of David is to bring about the Messiah. So the incestuous relationship of Lot and his daughters created a much later tribe that produced the great-grandmother of King David and an ancestor of the eventual Messiah. Not bad. Those of you who've seen my baseball cap that says "Make America Kind Again," that's the Ruth story. How kindness leads us to a messianic age. What are your thoughts about the split between Catholicism and Protestantism, as well as the anti-Semitism associated with the latter? I don't think about it. Sorry. You know what? I think that no matter what religion anybody is, they think they're right. Houston Smith, who I spoke about the other day, who wrote this book where, as you're reading it, it feels like he actually was a member of that community because he lived there and he wrote each chapter in the way that that community would want to be represented. He said in his book, if it were ever agreed that there was one true religion, the next day someone would create a new one. Because someone always believes that they are more right than somebody else. And if you think you have the only truth, probably the only truth is you don't. Hey, how many people remember the movie Oh God with George Burns? All right, not everyone, but John Denver played a man who God talked to. George Burns came to his grocery store and said, I want you to tell people to do the right thing. Wants him to be a prophet. That's what a prophet is. Someone in the Jewish tradition, a prophet is somebody who God speaks to, and they go out and they tell people what God said, and the people generally don't believe them. So there was a group of religious leaders in this movie that gave a questionnaire to the John Denver character, written in Aramaic, and said, if you're really talking to God, have God answer these questions. So God shows up, disguised as a busboy. And he comes in, he starts working on the questions with him, and it comes to the question, was Jesus your son? And there was silence in the movie theater. Everybody wanted to know from George God Burns if they were right or wrong. I saw this when I was a child, and I imagined a theater full of people who would take off their yarmulkes if they heard one answer, or put them on if they heard another answer. After a great silence, George Burns says, anyone remember? He said, Jesus was my son. Moses was my son. You're my son, and the guy who overcharged us for the steak, he's my son too. Next question. The wisdom of George Burns. The rift between Catholics and Protestants, that's your business. The anti-Semitism associated with the latter, I think that simplistically, this is not a full answer, simplistically is that everyone needs somebody to blame. Everyone wants somebody to put down. It leads me back to something that I meant to say yesterday that has nothing to do with this, but I guess it has to do with the rift between Protestant and Catholicism. When I was talking about the different labels of Jews, the Reform and the Conservative, the Orthodox, etc., these are not different religions. I don't think I made that clear enough. These aren't offshoots. Yes, it developed from one, but in the modern world, it's called Kalal Yisrael, the community of Israel. So there is still respect for one another, even though they practice different ways. Now, do individuals have some disrespect about others? Always. But as a whole, the Jewish community is the Jewish community. What? This is a great question. Why do people convert to Judaism as complete outsiders? Isn't there a strong ethnic component to the Jewish faith? Yeah, it's a very curious question. I always wonder. And I've officiated a number of conversions, and like everything else, they're all different. But most of my conversions, interestingly enough, a lot of people convert in order to get married because the family wants them to have a Jewish daughter-in-law. The ones who've come to me have not been those cases. And I don't push the idea because I think converting, changing your religion, is a very unique personal thing, and I wouldn't want somebody to do it if their heart wasn't in it. And I say, you can be part of a Jewish family if theologically that's not your religion. And I had a woman who got married. Before the wedding, before they got married, she took classes to convert. About the third or fourth class, she said, Jesus is important in my life, and I'm not Jewish. They got married. She learned to bake challah. She drove the Hebrew school carpool. She would sit with her husband in services wearing her cross. She was Catholic, and the priest told her that she could not take communion because she didn't get married in the church. So when she was 9 months pregnant, she had a second wedding in the church. I always wanted to imagine that. When they had been married 30 years, she said, I've been coming to this synagogue for a long time. I'm still Catholic, but I want to get married under a chuppah. So we did a renewal of vows. 10 years later, she said, I think I'm really Jewish. And converted after 40 years of marriage. I've had other people who converted for different reasons. One who he did a number who would not, they were part of a Jewish family, but didn't want to convert out of respect to their parents. Some did so after their parents died. Some didn't. But the key is, why do people convert? Some people just think it makes sense to me. They weren't happy where they were. Many have said, and this goes back to the idea of faith, many have said that they found their questions were not welcome by certain pastors. And I try to tell them that if you kept looking for other Christian churches, you probably would find one where your questions are welcome. But they often found the answer to a question, you just have to have faith. This is what their experience was. I'm not saying that that's what Christians do. Because when I speak to my Christian colleagues, they say, I wish they'd come to my church. I heard a story from a woman who had converted to Judaism. She was Swedish, and she had come to the U.S. as a foreign exchange student in high school, fell in love with an American man, stayed, and he was Jewish, and they lived a fairly normal American life, but he had a midlife crisis and decided he wanted to become a cantor. And so while he was studying to become a cantor, she was helping him with his studies. She was getting interested and enthused, and she said, I think I'd like to convert. And she did. And she was from Geneva, Switzerland. And when he finished his school, the first congregation he had was in Geneva, New York. And she told me she was telling that story to someone, and that person said, what year were you born? In Geneva. She told her 1941. And she told her a legend that I've heard many times, that when the Israelites left Egypt Not all the Israelites left. The devil you know versus the devil you don't know. And up to 70 to 80% of the Israelites who were enslaved in Egypt decided not to leave. But that there were some Egyptians who saw the injustice that was going on, and they joined the group that left Egypt. And the legend is that everybody who left Egypt, including those who weren't there 3,000 years ago, but that we all witnessed receiving the law at Sinai. And that those who were not part of the Israelite people who went along for the ride, years later their souls were reincarnated in Jewish bodies. And the woman who told this story to the woman who was born in Geneva, she said, just imagine how many Jewish souls needed bodies in 1941. Why do people convert? Everyone has their own reason. And sometimes they get into the ethnicity, and sometimes they have a hard time with it, and sometimes they're better accepted than others. Our teachings say that someone who converts to Judaism is to be treated as someone who was born Jewish. And the way people treat each other doesn't always fit the way we're taught to treat each other. So in my community, we have a number of people who have converted. Do you think stories such as Noah's Ark and the 10 plagues should be taken literally or metaphorically? Yes. They should be taken literally or metaphorically. Historians and scientists will say that these stories are impossible. And then use that to poke holes in the Bible or the Torah. How should we treat these stories if they aren't true? Does this hurt the integrity of the scripture? Did I answer that already? It's up to you. It's all in your hands. It's up to you. But if there's something to learn from it, and science is not necessarily completely inconsistent. I had a teacher by the name of Rabbi Judy Abrams, who was both a spiritual leader and a historian. And she could teach about who wrote the Bible, historically, giving names and categories to different parts of the text. It's called the documentary hypothesis, that some people say that takes away from the idea that God wrote the Bible, but she could give you the historical perspective when she was teaching that, and give you the spiritual perspective when she was teaching the other, because it all works together. We are scientists, we are theologians, and we can get along. Another Messiah question. The Mishnah has regulations on marriage and divorce. I'm not ignoring the Messiah questions, I'm just saving them. Marriage and divorce, does this suggest a difference from the Christian practice of till death do we part? When I perform marriages, I say as long as we both shall live. I don't like to ring the death, but yes, divorce is permitted in Judaism. There is a recognition that it does not always work. Some safeguards to that is, there's a document called a ketubah, which includes the dowry, the money that the bride's family pays the groom, so they don't have to worry about her anymore, and the prenup, in which the groom is supposed to pay twice the dowry to the bride, not to her family, so that she can support herself. The ketubah is the property of the bride. The groom is obligated to do his best, and there are certain obligations that he is commanded to fulfill. I wish I had them all on the top of my head. I think I'm close. There was food, shelter, clothing, marital relationships. The man is obligated to provide sexual relations with his wife, and the wife does not have such a commandment. The wife can demand of the man, and the man cannot demand of the woman. And the man is commanded, now again, these are ancient rules, but we can think about how they make sense. The man is commanded to marry and have children. The woman is not. Because the assumption is that the woman is going to be the nurturer. If the man is off studying and working, the woman is going to be in charge of the children. And if a woman knows that she is not a good nurturer, she's not obligated to get married and have children. The double-edged sword of this is that her status would be dependent on her husband and children. So she can choose to be a single woman without children, but it's going to be a hard life. So it's a double-edged sword, but it does recognize that as male-focused as the ancient religion was, there were certain things that were given to women. Another thing that was given to women was a holiday called Rosh Chodesh, which is the head of the month, and it's because of the legend that when the golden calf was made, the men willingly gave their gold to be melted, and the women did not. And so, because the women did not participate in the sin of the golden calf, then they were given a special holiday called Rosh Chodesh. Why was Uzzah killed when he touched the ark trying to keep it upright? This is a great question. For those who are less familiar with that particular passage in Prophets, they are carrying the Ark of the Tabernacle on a chariot. It begins to wobble. They were instructed, don't touch it, but it's wobbling. Uzzah is afraid it's going to fall. He touches it to put it upright, and he is immediately killed. You are so expressive. Thank you, Kathy. I think that it's another instance of the writing, whether it's God's desire or the writer's desire, to emphasize the power, emphasize the necessity of following things to the letter. This comes up, every week we have a Torah reading and a reading from another book of prophets or writings. Okay? This particular story of Uzzah is, I forget if it's the exact same week or a week close to it, is also the story of Aaron's sons Nadav and Abihu, who made a fire different than what was commanded. They were the sons of Aaron. They were to become the high priests. They made a fire that was different, and they were consumed by that fire, and Aaron was silent. It's a very disturbing portion, because here they were trying to praise God. Here, we're going to make a really big fire. God's asked for a little fire for incense. We're going to do a big one. And they died because of it. And so there's lots of interpretations about this. There's one that hints that maybe they were drinking alcohol, but there's nothing in the text to support that. But the idea was, it was different than what was commanded. So, like Uzzah, you don't follow the letter of the law and you get immediately punished. Well, this was a very difficult situation, and I'm not justifying the punishment, but I'm trying to understand it. Because these two men were Aaron's sons. They were going to take over the priesthood. They were to set the example. And the example was not to put the focus on themselves and have everyone say, look what a great fire they made, but to say, look, they did exactly what God asked them to do. And so it could be an exaggeration, that maybe they didn't really die, I don't think I'm going to go that far. They probably did. But it's because they were supposed to be the example. That when someone put in the position of a priesthood, then they are the example. Now the priests, when the temple was destroyed, they lost their jobs. Because sacrifice was the way of worship. And instead of sacrifice, I don't remember if I've talked about this before, but sacred study became, I think Amy Jill Levine talked about it in the Sunday school class. Sacred study became a form of worship. And so the rabbis pretty much replaced the priests with a wisdom, and this we did talk about in the Talmud, where they had discussions centuries apart. I like to think of it, do you remember John Houseman, who had that commercial for Smith Barney? We make money the old-fashioned way. We earn. I say the rabbis achieved their position the old-fashioned way. They learned it. So wisdom became more important than given the community you create and work for, what perspectives can you give us your perspective regarding the Palestinian-Israeli situation? No, I can't. I have lots of perspectives, and it comes down to, in my mind, right now nobody's right. And there isn't one way, one solution, and it's very complicated. Okay, so why do Christians and Jews view Jesus so differently? Why don't Jews see Christ as the Messiah? What can you tell us about the Messiah? What do you believe about the prophesied Messiah? A lot of questions. And 4 minutes. Can I have 6? As I mentioned before, Jewish teachings usually ignore Jesus. Jesus came at a time that was after the Torah was written. It was while the Talmud was still being created, and there was a competition. And they didn't want to be seen like the others. There was also the question of, did this one person fulfill all the requirements that the prophecies had mentioned? You could argue one way or the other, the proof of that. So there's a story about the Messiah. Specifically, Jesus is a long conversation. I have personally become much more respectful of the teachings of Jesus the more that I've shared with Christian colleagues. I have a friend and colleague in Oregon named Rabbi David Zaslow, who wrote a book called Jesus, First Century Rabbi, in which he compares the Gospels with the Talmud. And there's some interesting dissection of the Lord's Prayer, which was part of one of our, which is a condensing of 18 blessings that are part of our daily service. And Reverend Kim Orr, who is the worship director at Lakeside, wrote a book called The Chutzpah Gospel, I think, of Mark. Very interesting in the comparison. And so there's, as Jason said the other day, there's lots of similarities, lots of differences. I've got 2 concepts of Messiah that I like. One is a story about a village that had no rabbi. And they had a lot of strife and back-talking and gossip and people not being nice to each other. They had a list of problems, and so they decided they would send one of their community to the rabbi in the next town, who was very well known, and people would go miles and miles to ask him questions. And so they drew straws, and the one guy who picked the straw wasn't the brightest tool in the box, but he was the one who was assigned to go, and he took the great journey. He waited in line for a long time. he came to the rabbi, whose name was Reb Simcha, which means teacher of joy, and he was busy, and there were lots of people in line, and Shmuley, the guy who came, Shmuley said, okay, Rabbi, I finally got to talk to you. Yes, I'm from this village, and here's the list of things that we have problems with. Can you start to answer them? He says, well, before I get into the list, what was the name of the village again? He tells him. He says, you're coming to me for advice? The Messiah lives in your village. Well, ask the Messiah. And he said, the Messiah in our village? Really? Who is it? You've got the Messiah right there in your village and you don't even know who it is? I don't have time for you. And he sends him away. And he goes back and he's scratching his beard and wondering, gosh, who could it be? And he finally gets to the village and everybody crowds around him. Shmuley, what did the great rabbi say? What did he tell us? He said, well, he said that the Messiah lives here. They all looked at him. And they started to laugh. Oh, here's what you get when you send a fool to do a wise man's journey. And they laughed him out, and they said, who does he think? Wow, what a crazy answer. And Shmuley was just beside himself. He didn't know what to think. And he had some errands to do, and he had left some clothes at the tailor, and Moshe, the tailor, he wasn't there and didn't hear what everyone said because he was busy working. And he said, oh, Shmuley, you're back. What's that? Yeah, what did the great rabbi say? He says, well, he said the Messiah lives here. And Moshe laughed and, the Messiah, sure. In our village, who does he think it is? Me? What a great laugh here. No charge for your clothes. Just you've given me a good laugh for the day. And Shmuley's saying, maybe I got the message wrong. I don't know. Yeah, somebody like Moshe, he doesn't even have any learning. All Moshe does is fix clothes and give a fair price and offer credit when it's needed. Maybe that's the kind of thing a Messiah might do. Maybe I need to give Shmuley and tailors a little bit more respect, just in case. He kept on walking and he bumped into Yitz, the undertaker. And Yitz had heard the stories. He says, Shmuley, look at you, telling us the Messiah lives here. Who does he think it is? Me? And they both laugh at that together. And Shmuley says, yes, sure, Yitz, of course. The one person who does the one task that nobody else wants to do. He cares for our dead. Maybe I need to give the undertakers and funeral directors and grave diggers a little bit more respect, just in case. And as he was thinking about it, he bumped into Becca, a woman who was carrying a casserole to a house of mourning. And he smelled that delicious casserole and he thought, oh no, it couldn't be a woman. But why not? Maybe I need to give women a little bit more respect, just in case. And he was thinking so hard, he nearly tripped over a child playing in the street. And it was little Benji, and Benji was just so polite, and he helped him up and picked up the clothing he was carrying, and just didn't say a word, but just offered him help. And Shmuley said, a child? Everyone's a child sometime. Maybe I need to give children a little bit more respect, just in case. And he was getting very confused. And he went home, and he had this habit of talking to himself in the mirror when he was confused. And he looked in the mirror and he said, this is just confusing me to no end. Tailors, undertakers, women, children, any of them could be a Messiah, and I have to give them all respect. And if it could be any of them, then... Well, he said to the mirror, if it could be any of them, maybe it could be me. Maybe it's time I gave myself a little bit more respect, just in case. And from then on, Shmuley began to give everyone respect. But it seems that he wasn't the only one looking in the mirror that day, because others gave people more respect, just in case. And the village became known as the land of the Messiahs. There's a Talmudic teaching that says, if we were to treat each person we meet as the Messiah in disguise, how would our words and actions differ? And then, if the Messiah's identity is not revealed during our lifetime, it will not matter. At 3 o'clock, I hope it will be just more interaction and conversation. This has been one of my life's great experiences. Your openness, your willingness, your encouragement has really made a difference in my teaching. I sent my curriculum around to some colleagues, and one of them has already said, can I use this in a class I'm teaching? And so I thank you for the opportunity. I thank you for being here and being part of it.
Rabbi Dan, it's been amazing, and we've learned from you so much. And I think we'll show that learning by the fact that when we travel, when we're at home, when we're away, and we bump into the Jewish community, when we see a synagogue, when we think of our Jewish elder siblings, we'll think of them as family rather than someone else. So thank you for showing us that. I want to tell you about two people who aren't in the room. One is Vic Knowlton, who I never knew, but I've gotten to hear his legends. He's just died recently. He loved Religion and Life Hour. This meant the world to him. And he always wanted to be part of sponsoring the farthest out there speaker. Like, give me the one who's the biggest challenge, the most difficult, the one who's going to make my fellow Christians the most nervous. And we're going to remember his life on Monday in this space at 1 o'clock. And I think Carolyn and Jim are here. Yeah, bless you guys. You're in our prayers. And I love hearing how beloved your father and husband are. So may his memory be a blessing, and may he rest in peace and rise in glory. Thank you for being here, friends. We love you. Second person to tell you about is the Reverend Canon Dr. Jennifer Smith. Now, I'm jealous of this sister's titles because how do you get to pick up a title like Canon? It just sounds explosive. You know? So she's my fellow Methodist. She's a British Methodist, as it happens, although she is American, so unfortunately she doesn't have the Plummy accent. She's a canon at St. Paul's Cathedral. Now, this is interesting. St. Paul's Cathedral, there's a statue of John Wesley outside the cathedral. Now, this is appropriate because what it meant to be Methodist in the 18th century was they didn't care what church you were a member of. They didn't care who you were baptized by. They cared if you believed in Jesus. And if you said, oh yeah, I'm totally a member of St. Paul's, I attend every Sunday, they'd impatiently say, I didn't ask you that. Do you believe that Jesus has made you a new creature? Oh, you do? That's nice. Great. When were you last in prison? Was it yesterday? You haven't been today? Well, come with me. We'll go together. Methodists have a kind of insistence on the vibrancy of your own faith, and that the only way to detect it is by the vibrancy of your actions on behalf of the poor, treating everyone as the Messiah in disguise. And the Methodist revival burned through not only England, but North America. You wouldn't have a Chautauqua without John Wesley's question. Is Jesus raised not just in history, but in your life? And can people tell? How? Show me the evidence. Early Methodists would have these little meetings, and they'd get together and they'd say, all right, great. Who sinned this week? You first. Anyway, so that's enough about that. But Jennifer's amazing. I'm so glad you're going to get to hear all next week, and she'll preach on Sunday. And that's our last week of the season. So, Dan, once again, thank you so much. We'll never forget you. Bless you.